Hey guys, Brian Castro here with Better Chess Training, and today I've got both a beautiful and an instructive game to share with you. It was played between Vladas Mikenas and Vassily Smyslov, one of our world champions. And um, this was played in Moscow in 1944. I believe it was a Soviet championship. And let's get right into it. It starts out with d4, d5, c4, c6. This is the Slav defense, um, and we might not have seen it. I don't know if I've done any videos with any games of it before, but the idea here is, as opposed to the traditional Queen's Gambit declined, um, this light square bishop is not pinned in here, so it's not a problem piece in this particular opening. So let's see what happens. Knight to f3, knight to f6, knight to c4, and then d takes c4. And here we grab this pawn. And in most lines, or in a lot of lines, black is not going to try to hold on to it too much, although he does in some lines, and it can be a very leads to some very sharp positions. The Slav is fairly flexible and can lead to both very sharp tactical positions as well as more positional quiet um, types of games. So it really depends. There's both positional players like Smyslov who play Slav, and then there's players like Kasparov who played it as well. So it can go a lot of different ways. So that's what makes it a very interesting opening. But in any case, let's get back to it. In this case, White plays a4 to prevent b5, so he's playing to get that pawn back. Um, just to show you an example of when White allows Black to hold on to that pawn would be openings like this where he plays e4, and then b5 is often played. And the idea here is usually to allow Black to create this strong little structure here so that he can attack it later. For example, e5, knight to d5, and then a4 attacking here this pawn structure. And this particular variation with e5 is known as the Geller Gambit. But let's get back to the game. A4, bishop to f5 is played, freeing that bishop, as we mentioned before. E3, e6, bishop takes c4, and then bishop takes b4. Now, one thing to note here is that when White played this a4 move, he weakens the b4 square. So, although it was probably, it was a fine move to make to prevent b5, there is a weakness here. So whenever you make these big pawn moves, or when you move these two pawns up, especially on the wings, just know that you are sometimes creating weaknesses that can be occupied by an opposing piece. Okay, White castles, and bishop to g6, and queen to e2. Now White is preparing this e4 pawn push, as well as freeing the or vacating the back rank for the rooks. Knight b to d7, and then knight to a2. This move was criticized by Smyslov and as kind of an awkward move and not necessary. What Smyslov suggested he should play, and what's been played by many masters here, is e4. Now, at first glance, this seems to lose a pawn after bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and then knight to e4. However, practice has shown, and many strong players have shown, that bishop to a3, which keeps this king from castling, also taking up this nice open diagonal here, is very strong and gives White an initiative. Okay, let's show you some moves from a game. Queen to c7, knight to d2, knight d to f6, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, rook f to e3, castles queenside, and here queen to b2. We can see that although White is a pawn down, he has the two bishops and open lines at Black's king. And so this position white definitely has compensation for that pawn, and in this particular game, this is from Garry Kasparov playing white again. He defeated Evgeny Boreev in Tilburg, 1991. So maybe we'll make another video on that game at some point. But instead, Mikenas played knight to a2, trying to kick this bishop out. And so we retreat to bishop to d6, and then he goes back here to knight to c3. So white seems like he's lost a tempo, but remember, black did play bishop to b4 earlier, so it's not really that much of a loss of time, but just not a very, you say, not an incredibly strong move according to modern theory. Okay, black castles, and then white plays e4, okay, creating a broad pawn center. One thing to know, especially in the beginning here, is that, or for beginners and intermediate players, one thing to understand in the opening is that this is kind of what you want to create at some point. If you play a d4 opening to start, eventually you want to try to break open with e4. If you play a, whichever pawn you play in the opening first, typically a goal of the opening is to play the other pawn here to create this broad center. Of course, your opponent has a chance to attack it or to contest it, and that's how we get a lot of tension and the competitive strategy in chess. But that's kind of one of the opening. That's kind of a general idea behind the chess openings. Okay. Besides creating this strong pawn center, white also has a tactical threat. So what I want you to do is pause the video and identify what white's tactical threat is, and then come up with what you would play. Okay, so pause the video and then let's see what happened. Okay, well, white is threatening to advance with e5. For example, let me just make this move here, and he's threatening this fork of the knight and bishop. So black responds with e5, and this is both to stop that tactical threat as well as fight in the center. Again, this is one of the battles in the opening is for control of the center. So this e5 is actually a thematic pawn lever in many of the Queen's Gambit declined and Slav variations. So look for those in your games if you play this opening. And when in games where he fails to play this, and maybe I'll make a video, black often gets a very cramped game. So very common and very important pawn break for black. Okay. D takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and bishop takes e5. So here we see that the smoke is cleared a little bit, and these exchanges have kind of helped black to free his game. So remember, in the opening here, white has a little more space, and he has a little bit of an initiative, so some of those exchanges now allow black's pieces to have a little more freedom. Okay, white plays f3, and again there's a threat if he didn't play that, and the idea is, if say he played something like f4 with the idea of threatening to push it to f5 to trap this bishop, then black can win a pawn with bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and then bishop takes e4. Okay, so that's why he plays f3 here. And black plays queen to c7. And now g4 is played. And so the idea here strategically is that we're kind of hampering these minor pieces here, particularly this bishop. So white, in a way, has a positional advantage. He has more space and better pieces somewhat at the moment. However, it's still early in the game, and I think Smyslov allowed this. Comments that it's going to take a while for this bishop to get back in the game, but he figures that he can do that, and that's one of the things he did. It takes a little while, but we'll see what happens. Okay, rook f to e8. Bishop to e3, covering this diagonal, and now bishop to f4. Okay, so black offers to exchange these dark square bishops. The main plus in white's position is his kingside space, and so by trading the bishops, black can hopefully mitigate that damage a little, because part of one of the general strategies when you are, if you have a space disadvantage, is to exchange pieces. So that's one idea. The other idea here is this dark square bishop is very nice. It's very useful for white. It protects the king from checks along this line, as well as eyes these pawns over here. So by offering to trade those off, black reasons that it'll be a good idea. Okay, queen to d2. Well, white is not going to do that necessarily. Now, if black were to go ahead and exchange those off here, this queen is just nicely placed. These rooks are going to come in. Not a big deal in any case. But black plays a very interesting move. Queen to b6, pinning this bishop. Okay, and essentially forcing a trade of queens. Okay, and bishop takes b6, and bishop takes d2, and these trades favor black because of white's space advantage, meaning that the less pieces that are on the board, the less cramped that black is going to be. Okay, bishop to d4, coming back along, centralizing the bishop, coming back along this diagonal. Knight to d7, rook f to d1. Okay, black plays bishop to f4, and one idea that you may be looking at, and that I looked at when I analyzed this game, is this idea of a discovered attack on this knight. However, it doesn't work. Let's say, for example, bishop takes g7, then black's going to hit this bishop here, and then after this bishop retreats, he's going to win this bishop. So that doesn't work. Same thing if he, let's go back here. If he plays bishop takes a7 with the same idea, well, now we just go to e5, and we're hitting this hanging bishop. So he's able to, the knight's able to escape with tempo. Okay, so white plays bishop to b3 instead, and black plays another good positional move, a5. Okay, so this has the effect of locking down this pawn, but more importantly, it secures this b4 square. Okay, so this could tactically or strategically can be a very important square for black. King to g2. Rook a to d8, developing his rook on this open file. Knight to e2, threatening this bishop. So the knight here is headed to f4. Okay, the knight needed a new home because there's no way that black was going to allow him to get to these nice squares here from c3. So he's got to move. Bishop to c7. Of course, we don't want to trade this bishop. Bishop to e3. So black is securing the square for the knight. And here, Smyslov plays prophylactically. He's looking, why does he want to get to f4? And the idea here is to take out this bishop, or one of the ideas is to take out this bishop and weaken these kingside pawns, because we've got this bishop coming down this way as well. So black prevents that somewhat by playing h6, going to make room for this bishop. Okay, rook to d2. White is going to try to double on the d file. Knight to e5. And strategically, this knight is on a nice square. We can't play f4 yet because the g4 pawn is hanging. And at the moment, black also does not want to allow white to double these rooks. So it reveals, moving the knight reveals this rook. Okay. Rook a to d1, and rook takes d2, rook takes d2, and rook to d8. And something I wanted to share with you, I've been kind of contemplating this a little bit, is that I've been studying some of these games of these great endgame players, players like Capablanca and Rubinstein and Smyslov, and something I've noticed a lot is they kind of do a lot of maneuvering around with their pieces as we're entering into the endgame, and when they find kind of that right feel, they go ahead and they trade rooks off. Okay, and I think the idea is that they have such a good understanding of the endgame order, confidence in the endgame that they understand and they can play with such precision that they know what they. If I can get these rooks off the board, that eliminates a lot of the complications, and I can win a technical endgame. So we see that here, and if you'll notice, maybe in some of my other videos with endgames with Capablanca. Um, that you'll see that occasionally. And if you just play, when you see enough games, you'll start to notice that. So it's something that I kind of had an aha moment on when I was analyzing this game. Okay, rook takes d8 check, bishop takes d8, and then here's that knight to f4, hitting this bishop. Okay, bishop to h7. So, one thought is, well, why don't we just let him exchange this bishop off, because it's kind of stuck behind these pawns and can't really do too much. But again, Smyslov is thinking long term, and in this upcoming endgame, having this bishop and being able to redeploy it at some point, and we'll see how he does that here, is going to be important. And even though this knight is very active in the endgame, especially with pawns on both sides, the two bishops are going to be important. And we've seen that in another, actually more recent video about the power of the two bishops in the endgame. Okay, so for example, king to f8, knight takes g6, f takes g6. We can see here that these pawns are all huddled in the corner, and now white has this very powerful passed pawn, which will be a definite endgame plus, as well as the two bishops, which are just going to shred this this knight to pieces if black were to allow him to do that. But that's why Smyslov retreated the bishop. Okay, bishop to d4, threatening this knight, and bishop to c7. And what does white play here? He plays bishop takes e5. And Smyslov commented that he didn't see a reason for this, and the problem is that black has a lot of, if you look at all these dark square weaknesses all around his on his side of the board, and so now without the dark square bishop to defend it, black's going to have a technical advantage. So before I move on, let's just go back. I was trying to analyze what would white have played instead. I think he was afraid this knight was very strong. He's hitting these pawns here. Can hop over to here at some point if this knight moves. So I think that's why he did it. But I think if he just would have improved the position of his king, say for something like this, and then let's say black does the same, getting out of this pin, king to e2, king to e7, and then white now, for example, in this particular position, can attack these pawns. And if black tries to play g5 to protect this pawn and protect here, then knight to g3, moving around here now, it seems like a nice move here. Knight to g6, knight to f5 check, winning this pawn, just as an example. And if we go back here, if he plays king to f2, we play g5 right away. Knight to h5, threatening here is also a nice move. And I think white's position is fine. So that's just a little playing around with the pieces there. But instead he took the bishop, and black takes back, hitting this pawn. So knight to d3, protecting the pawn, hitting the bishop, and bishop to d4. Okay, so this is a great move here. We can see this bishop's just cutting down here, cutting off the space for the king. Knight can't go back there right now, or it's covered right there. Knight can't play to e5. So this bishop is going to be a key player for a few moves here. King to f1, king to f8, and bishop to c4. What's the idea here? First, we want to move this pawn so that this knight can move. Okay, it's being attacked. Also, at some point, black is going to want to play b5 to try to create a passed pawn, and so this helps to play against that a little bit. King to e7, b3 is played again now, taking it off the dark squares. g5. This move does a few things. It locks down this f4 square so we can't advance it with the pawn. or with the knight. Also, what it does is it prepares us to start to free this light square bishop. King to e2, now f6. Okay, so now this bishop can get out at some point. It's taken a while, but I think Smyslov had this in mind. Knight to e1. Now this knight's free to move since he's not protecting the c2 square. Bishop to g6. Okay, could come over here at some point. Also can play h5 maybe at some point. Okay, knight to c2, attacking the bishop. Okay, bishop to g1. Okay, quick hit on this h2 pawn. Of course, white's not going to allow him to take it, but he wants to keep in contact with this this diagonal here. And also, by forcing this h2 pawn to advance, this g3 square becomes weaker. And you can see maybe in some lines where the king comes down here at some point. Okay, h3, king to d6. Okay, so the king is getting into these central dark squares here. Bishop to g8. And bishop to c5. Okay, let's just go back here real quick. Just look at these pawns here on the king's side. If white had his dark square bishop, these pawns would not be safe, and it would be harder to free this king. So in a way, this strategic mistake that white made, even though it didn't make an immediate impact, we can see now that it has huge implications in the game. Bishop to c5. Okay, so what this move does is that when white played his bishop to g8, one of the things he's doing is opening up the c4 square. So black plays bishop to c5. It hits knight to this a3 square, so white can't play his knight to a3 and then to c4. Okay, so that's a very strong move, very prophylactic move. So white plays his knight back to e1, and now black moves in on these dark squares. Now, you might have noticed that white is going to fork the king and bishop. But just like I mentioned earlier with the rooks, let's take a look here. Knight takes d3 check, king to d4, knight takes c5, king takes c5. Black had this in mind. I mean, he allows this move because he knows that with this queenside majority, he now has a technical advantage that he's going to be able to push. That he's going to be able to create a passed pawn and probably win this game. Okay, king to e3, preventing the king from coming back to d4, and also preparing maybe for an f4 advance. Okay, and so b5 is played. A takes b5, c takes b5, and now black's going to create a passed pawn. Okay, white plays f4, trying to fight back. And so my question to you is, what does black play? Pause the video and see what would you play next for black. Okay, did you have a chance to take a look at it? I hope you did. And I hope you found g takes f4 check. That is the winning move, actually. Some of you may have thought to push a4 to create this passed pawn, and it's not a great move. It probably isn't losing. I've done a bit of analysis on this position, but let me show you an example here. B takes a4, and then if we create that passed pawn, white now has f5, okay? And after bishop to e8, he has an incredible move here, e5. And then if we try to take that, then f6, and then if king to d6 to try to stop it, f7 is going to win this bishop, and black is going to be lost because white's bishop's going to be able to stop his pawn. Okay, so that was one position. Let me just go back real quick here. I did do a little bit of analysis. Hard to come to some conclusions. A lot of variations here. If instead of taking here, black plays g takes f4 check, king takes f4, and then takes on a4. Um, Black might still be able to win, but it's just not as nice. It's a little more complicated after e5, f takes e5, check, and then king takes e5. So um, I think Black might still have the advantage here, but it's a lot more complicated than what happens in the game, which we'll see. So if you want to analyze these positions and let me know in the comments what you think, that'd be great. Or maybe I will do a kind of a bonus video analyzing this endgame a little more. I do enjoy analyzing the endgames, but there's so many. It's so the precision you need is so great that it's hard to make anything definitive um, here without maybe like a chess engine or table basis, but I wanted to try to analyze this on my own to try to improve my own skills. So let's go back to the game though, because the game move g takes f4 check is much more definitive and much stronger than those variations we just looked at. King takes f4, and now king to d4. This is the key move here, because now that e5 idea that I just showed you isn't available. Okay. Bishop to d5, protecting the pawn. a4. Now Black creates his passed pawn. B takes a4, B takes a4, h4. Okay, trying to get a little bit of counterplay. Okay, a3, h5, and now bishop takes e4. Okay, of course, if White wins the bishop, Black gets a queen. So after bishop takes e4, White retreats his bishop. Bishop to d5. And now bishop to b1. So final quiz position for today. Pause the video and tell me what you would play as Black in this position. Okay, I hope you did a little bit of, put a little thought into this. Now, if you said, well, I'm going to play a2 and win this bishop, then unfortunately, it is not a winning move. Bishop takes a2, bishop takes a2, and then king to f5, and we're going to win these two pawns because they're sitting on dark squares. Bishop to d5, king takes f6, bishop to f3. Now it's, by the way, it's Black that's got to try to take these pawns off the board to get a draw. King to g6, bishop takes g4, king takes h6, and bishop takes h5 is a draw. So a2 would have been incorrect, but Smyslov didn't play that, and I hope the rest of you also found king to c3. And here White resigned because even if king to f5, king to b2, king takes f6, and then we are going to make a queen, and we are going to be able to win fairly easy after that. So back here, after king to c3, White resigned. And I hope that you found that move, and that is the game. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Vassily Smyslov is becoming one of my favorite players as I study his games, and so I hope you enjoyed that game as well. If you did, please press the like button. Better Chess Training is here to help you improve your chess, and thank you for letting me join your chess journey, as well as thank you for joining mine as we improve at chess together. So I'll see you in the next video, and have a great day.